I sold my company to save it. Will TikTok do the same? Let's talk about it. By the way, I'm KJ Miller. I am a founder, lecturer, and content creator. I love talking about all things business and pop culture. If you like any of that, be sure to subscribe. Now let's get into it. As many of you know, several years ago, I founded a company called Mented Cosmetics, and I ran that company as its CEO for several years before we hit the roadblock of running out of cash. And by the way, a lot of startups were running out of cash around this same time period of 2023. Call it 2022 to 2023. You saw a lot of startups run out of capital because the venture capital landscape really dried up, particularly for consumer product companies. And that, if you care, was tied to interest rates going up and money becoming a lot more expensive. We don't have to get into all the details, but the upshot of all of that was that venture capitalists stopped being willing to invest in a lot of companies, particular companies like mine, a consumer company, and we were reliant on venture capital in order to fund our business at the time. We were newly profitable, but we were not cash flow positive. And so we were very reliant on venture capital. And when that landscape dried up, I looked around and said, oh my God, we are either going to sell or we're going to go out of business. Those are my only two options because I wasn't able to raise more funding. And by the way, I managed to get a deal done, and I'm very proud of that fact. A lot of companies in a similar situation did not survive that. They weren't able to sell, they weren't able to get a deal done, and they closed their doors. That's not what happened to Mented, and I am very proud of the fact that I got a deal across the finish line. And there's no shame in my game about that. The reality is that's what I had to do to save the brand. And I did it. And I am very proud of myself and very proud of the brand for seeing it through. And now we are thriving. All of our products are back in stock. Mentedcosmetics.com if you want to shop any of the products I currently have on my face. I'm very proud of that. But all of this has recently made me think about TikTok because, of course, TikTok is facing a ban on January 19th. And one of the only ways out of this ban is for them to divest the American portion of TikTok, and essentially to find an American owner and to sell it to that American owner. Now, there is another escape hatch, and I will just briefly talk about whether or not I think this Supreme Court case is going to go in their favor. And the headline is, I do not. I wish that it does. I hope that it does. I have a very big following over on TikTok. I want it to survive, and I would love it if the Supreme Court came back and said, this ban is unconstitutional. And so TikTok gets to continue moving forward as is, without any interruptions from Congress or the president. I would love that. However, I just don't think that that's going to be the case. And the reason why is because this Supreme Court, and these justices have proven they are here to do Trump's bidding. And I can't think of any president who would be more inclined to keep the power to shut down foreign adversary-owned apps than Trump. All he wants is more power and more control. And so for the court to strike down this law, they would basically be saying Congress and the president don't have the authority to shut down an app like this, even if they think it's run by foreign adversaries. And I just cannot see these justices taking that sort of power away from Trump. They have shown us they are in his pocket. So hopefully I'm wrong. I would love to be wrong. That is how I think this court case is going to go, which then leaves the only path to TikTok being able to continue to function in America is a sale. The question here is, do I think TikTok will sell? Now, for a long time, I personally thought that ByteDance, which is the parent company of TikTok, would never allow TikTok to be sold. And I thought that for a couple of reasons. One, they said it. Okay, they went on record and said, we're not going to sell. Two, the Chinese government has said that they consider TikTok's algorithm to be Chinese IP, as in it is intellectual property of China. Those two things combined led me to think, nah, they're not going to sell it. But I've started to rethink that for one major reason, and that is the fact that TikTok's revenue, such a large percentage of TikTok's revenue comes from America, and 60% of ByteDance's investors are global investors, including many, many large investors here in America, including companies like BlackRock and KKR. So there are a lot of large investors who have invested in ByteDance, again, which is the parent company, who are American, and also America makes up a really significant portion of TikTok's revenue. I did some digging online. It was hard to find just like a really clean stat around this. However, one stat I did find that if you look at in-app purchases, the people in the US have spent about $41 million in the app, which is about 55% of the global total for in-app purchases. So if we are making up, we might not make up the majority of users on the app. There are 137 million Americans on the app and well over a billion users total. So while we are not the majority of users, we make up in some instances over half of the revenue. So if these investors, including American investors, were to see this ban go through and TikTok in the US just completely cease to exist, that is money down the drain. They are going to watch the revenues and therefore the profits for their investment plummet. And I just cannot see these investors allowing that to happen, which is why I have come around to the idea that I do think a sale is going to get done. Now, with that said, a few caveats. One, China still has issued essentially that mandate saying that the algorithm as it exists is intellectual property of China, which means if TikTok were to get sold, they would essentially be selling the asset of the brand name. TikTok, the bones of it, the algorithm that we all have come to love, they wouldn't be selling. So whoever purchased it would have to replace that algorithm with, just a generic algorithm based on interest and likes or whatever. So the way we use the app and what we're used to seeing on our FYP, all of those things would be subject to change because I do not believe the algorithm in its current state would be sold. The other caveat I'll give is that once it is sold, it is entirely up to the owners how to operate it. So the other thing that might go away is creator rewards. I am in the creator rewards program. It does provide a fairly significant portion of income for me. It's not my only source of income, nor is it my primary source of income, but it is not insignificant, the amount of income that I make from TikTok. And so for creators like me, that could go away. The new owners could decide, we don't want to do that anymore. We think people will post to this platform, whether they're getting paid or not. And frankly, they're probably right. There are a lot of countries like Canada that are not currently participating in the creator rewards program. People still post from Canada. Okay, so they could be right about that. Obviously, I would hope and pray that they would keep it and allow me to stay in it if they did buy it, but they would not be obligated to. The final thing I will say about if a sale does get done is if it is something that they are considering or even slowly behind the scenes working on, that is not something that we are going to hear about until a deal is done. And that's for a lot of reasons. Anytime one company is thinking about acquiring another company, everything is kept under wraps. Everybody's under NDA. And that's really to protect both companies. If you are an acquirer, let's say Facebook, Meta, wants to acquire TikTok. If they let everybody know, hey, we're in diligence, we're about to get a deal done, I'm talking to the CEO every day, and then for some reason the deal falls through, their stock, Facebook stock, is almost certainly going to take a hit. So that's a harm done to them. And it's probably going to be harder for TikTok to get a deal done with someone else because you're going to see other players who may have been in the field look at that deal falling through and say, oh, well, if Zuckerberg couldn't get it done with all of his billions of dollars and all of his lawyers, I'm not going to be able to do it, so I'm not even going to try. So letting people know that there might even be a deal on the table can be very harmful for both parties, which is why you always see these sorts of things under wraps, and we really wouldn't know until a deal is done. But the bottom line for me is I do think the amount of value from a revenue and profit perspective that would be lost if TikTok just completely ceased to exist in America is so high that their investors would not allow that to happen and that some form of a deal will get done. Of course, there's always the backup option that the Supreme Court saves TikTok. And of course, I hope that that's the case. But I want to know, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think I'm right? Do you think I'm wrong? Let me know in the comments. And if you love this sort of content, be sure to subscribe. I'll see you next time.